All right, hi again. So in this video we're going to talk about float. All right, float things here. We've played with floats earlier. We did a little float with an image, right, and moved it over and the text wrapped around. And we'll see that again and make sure that we understand that. But we're going to sort of get more in depth into the intricacies of floats and see what they can be used for, and we'll start to see how they can be used for CSS layout. So floats are really designed kind of what we did earlier with the image and wrapping and sending an image left or right, or some element left or right, and then the text sort of wraps around it. That's really what it was designed for. But designers figured out and developers figured out that you could use it to do layout. So this is what we're kind of working towards, is using floats to do layout. So a few things to start with, just to see what this page is made of. A lot of the code is already in here. I have three styles to color certain things. So I have a red style, which makes things red, a blue one, which makes them blue, and a green one, which makes them green. That makes sense, right? I also have a bunch of containers already made. They are divs. If you look down here at the bottom, there are a bunch of divs, starting with float 1, and then they go outside container 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Each of a lot of those outside containers, here's one right here, have divs inside of them with classes of 1, 2, and or 3. You can also see that this first one, for example, this has a div class equals 1 and then a space and then red. That's how you apply two classes. So this div has two classes. It has a class of red, which makes it red. You can see they're all red already. And then a class of 1, which is what we're going to do the float stuff in. So you can't apply more than one class. You just put a space between, and that's how it works. So we're going to go through some of the, like I said, the intricacies of floats. I have a lot of the selectors already done for you, just to save a little time, and so we don't make mistakes on dumb things like selectors while you guys are doing this with me. You can see that each of the outside containers has a little margin on it and has an outline so we can see it. It has a dashed outline. You see the little dashed outline there around the edge. All right. So let's get going. So let's talk about floats a little bit. The float property moves an element as far as possible to the left or right, allowing the following content to wrap around it. We saw that before. And we'll see that again when we do a float in a minute. The content wraps around the floats or flows around the floats. Floats generally stay in the content area of the containing element, but I'll show you how that's a little bit fishy, because you can see how floats can kind of get out of a containing element if the float is not contained. What does that mean? We'll see. Margins are maintained. The entire element box from the outer edge to the outer edge is floated. So when you float something, the margins float with it, the padding floats with it, all that kind of stuff goes with it if you have that on your element that you're floating. If you float an inline element, like an image is an inline element, it behaves like a block element. But mostly what we're going to be doing is floating block elements to start to do CSS layout. And margins on floated elements do not collapse, unlike vertical margins in the normal flow. So if we have a margin here between two vertical elements that are blocks, they normally collapse, which we talked about, I believe, already. But what that means is, if you had a margin of 50 pixels, say, on top of this paragraph, and 50 pixels on the bottom of this space would not be 100. It would collapse to the largest one, which would be 50. They're both 50. So they don't add up, vertical margins. But if they're floated, they do. So just be aware of, in the normal flow, your margins will collapse. It'll use the biggest margin, either the top one of this one or the bottom one of that one. But when you're floating things, they don't. So it would add them together, theoretically, although you don't see it too much. All right, so I think we are ready to get going. So if you go down here, I have a ID, or an object, or a div that's already marked normal flow. And again, this means that an ID, right? The pound sign means an ID. If I look down here, I will see somewhere div ID equals normal flow. So that's this div right here. You can't really see it yet. We'll turn that on. So most of these are just divs with IDs or classes on them. That's all they are. Okay. So for normal flow, we want to see what the normal thing that we've seen before. Let's do width of 300 pixels. And we'll give it a background color. So we'll say background dash color. And let's do a CCC gray. All right, so now we can see this box. So this is that box. And this image is in the normal flow, just like we've seen before. So the way, again, I think of it is normal flow is it's going to go left to right, top to bottom until it runs out of space, and then it's going to wrap around to the next side. So this, basically this image is behaving like a big letter, right? So what if we want to wrap this stuff around on one side or the other? That's where you would use floats. So this next box here was the same, but we're going to add some stuff to it to do a float inside of here. So this next box is called Float 1. It has this the same image in it, but it's nothing's been done to it yet. So we are going to give it a width of 300 pixels. And we're going to say background, let me go to the next line, background dash color. Sorry, I'm cheating a little bit with my code hinting. I'm going to say background color of gray again. And that's that. So we still see the same thing right now, but now we're going to float this image. So how do we float that image? Well, we could apply a class to it or go and do inline style, but I wanted to make practice our descendant selectors a little bit. So since this box is called Float 1 and this image is inside of it, we can use that. We can say Float 1, not flout, Float 1. I did it again. Float 1 space img, which means an image that's inside of Float 1. And on this one, we want to say float right. And I'm going to give it a margin while we're here. I'm going to say margin of 10 pixels, let's say. All right, so now that I did that, this image, this selector means, remember what this means. This means a descendant selector. That means any image which is inside of something that it has an ID of Float 1. So this box has an ID of Float 1. This image is inside of it, obviously. So this applies. It would apply to every image. There's only one, but it's applying to this image because there's only one, right? So we floated it to the right, and then it wraps around, and we put a margin on it, and you see the margin as well. So that's what it was kind of designed for, and that's what we've used it for before. Let me show you one thing, and then I'll back out of it and put it back the way it was. So you don't have to do this part because it might be kind of messy. So what I'm going to do is go down inside of Float 1, and I'm going to take out most of the text after the image, and look what happens. Now the box is up here. The image is leaking out. It doesn't fit. So floated elements are kind of out of the normal flow. They're kind of like an island in the stream, right? Things go around them, but the box that they're in kind of doesn't realize where the edges are. You can think of it that way. So this, you can see the box that was following has now jumped up underneath it. So I want to go back up and show you one thing that we'll look at again later, but just to show you if this happens to you, like, what? I want this box to be around that. I don't want it to leak out, right? So one way you can do that is called clearing floats, and one way to do that is to use the overflow property. So I'm going to say overflow auto. And some people use hidden. I'm not sure which is the advantage of which, but oops, sorry, that doesn't go on there. I knew that wasn't right. It goes on the float, on the box itself. So I'm going to say on Float 1, I'm going to say overflow auto. And now what happens is the box contains the float. It's called containing the floats. There's more than one way to do this. It depends on your situation, but this is one way. So you say overflow auto on the box that's on the outside, and it now contains that floated element. It doesn't go crashing up here and leak out. So that, I wanted to show you that here because it applies in this case, but I'm going to undo all this stuff. Like I said, don't do what I do, especially that mistake there. And I'm going to go back and put in all that text. Okay, this is where we were, right? We had all this text. You can see if I don't really have to worry about it if there's a lot of content that follows the float in this case, because you know, this content is pushing the bottom of this box down. But if we didn't have enough content below this image, we could have a situation where this image leaks out, which is what we saw. All right, so that's probably good on that. All right, so let's get to the nitty-gritty here. So we're going to go down to down below this and add. I'm just going to make you add these selectors once so you can make sure you know how that's working, and then we'll use the ones that are already in here. So the first box we're going to sort of specify is outside container 1. So since it's an ID, it's outside container, I think, and 1. And then we want to put a space and .1. And then put our brackets. Let me space this out a little bit. So what does this mean? This means I am targeting something that has a class of 1, which is inside of something called outside container. So if I look down here, way down here, where's outside 1? Outside 1. There. There's outside container 1. And it has this thing called 1 in it, or the class of 1. Notice too that I have one called outside container that I didn't do anything to. I wanted to leave that in to show you the default way that block level elements stack. So now we're talking about block level elements, which are divs, and divs automatically stack like this, horizontally or vertically, and they go all the way across their containing element, whatever that is. In this case, it's the browser. So this is the same kind of container. They just go one on top of each another. So how do we make these go next to each other instead of vertically to make columns? That's what we use floats for. So we're going to make divs go sideways instead of vertically. That's kind of what we're doing. All right, let's get back to this. So we have outside container 1.1. That means anything with 1 inside of outside container 1, if that makes sense. And we're going to float that. And we're going to float it left. And then you always want to give a width to anything that you float. So I'm going to say width of 40%. Like that. All right, so now we have floated this left, and the width is 40%. You can see what happened. We kind of have a layout already, right? Sort of. A container anyway with some different columns in it. So we have 2 columns because we floated this left and gave it a width. It's now 40% of the width of its containing element, which is this one, and it went all the way left, and everything else that was after it started going around to the right. So we kind of have a super basic layout right there, or a container with some stuff in it, if you want to. That's kind of a layout. We are going to add one more thing here. What if we want to stack these up? So I have here floats can stack up left to right or right to left. Always provide a width for floated block elements. Okay, so I'm going to go and copy and paste this just to save a little time. And now we're in outside container 1, but we want to style the second box, which I've gave a class of 2. And the rest we can leave the same. So float left is the same, width is 40%, that's the same. Here's what happens, right? So now this one is 40%, this one's 40%. They stack up next to each other, left to right. And then the third container is leaking up, or wrapping actually around it, just like we saw up here with the image. It's wrapping around it. So same thing, right? So that's what we expect. So now we've got 2 columns, and we've got another thing down there. That's what we wanted. One thing that I wanted to show you is, what if I change this left to right? So I'm going to go right here and right here. So now if I float them both to the right, it looks like I changed the order of the source, but I didn't. Here's the first box. It's now way over on the right. Since it's first in the source, it goes over to the right first. This was second in the source, so it goes next to it, going right as far as it can go. And now the following one, the third container, is wrapping around on the left side. So it looks like we reversed the order of these things, but we didn't. We just changed the float from left to right. So remember that that's a possibility, is you can float things left to right, and they stack up left to right if you do it that way too. All right, so that is that one. So let's go on to number 2, container 2, which now you're going to thank me. I already put in the selectors for you so we don't mess that simple part up. So again, each one of these is a different box with a different ID, and then we have these classes on it for the 3 different possible containers in there. So outside container 2.1, that one is going to be floated to the left again. So let's do float left again. And remember, you always want a width, so we put our width back to 40. Could have probably copied and pasted that, huh? Always copy and paste unless you're copying and pasting mistakes. And then, so that was 1. 2 will be the same, so we will copy and paste. Oops, don't forget. See, I almost copied in a mistake. I left that guy off, although it would probably work anyway. Let's put that there. So outside container 2.2 has float left and width 40, which is the same as we had before. But now we have a third one in here. So what do we want to do if we want to keep this third column or third container from wrapping? So this is another one way to clear floats. It's called clearing floats. It's kind of the way I could think of clearing floats. Where are you doing this one here? Is getting out of the floats. You want to get out of that float situation where you have things stacking up or wrapping. So if we don't want this to wrap around, we have to clear it. And the way you can do that, one way to do that, is on the following element, which is the third element, you apply a clear. So you say clear both. And I think we played with that before too, right? So now this makes this box, this third div, not wrap up around in the corner in here. It makes it stick down below here too. Another weird thing that we'll look at later. Well, maybe I'll show you now just real quick. I'm gonna go inside of number 1 here and say background color transparent, which is like a little trick to make the background color disappear even though we applied it earlier. And then I'm going to take this clear both off. You don't have to do this, but we're going to take it off when I'm done here. All right, so now I've got outside container 2.1 is now clear. Wait a minute, did it go away? Yeah, and I took the clear off. So now we've got it back where we were here, but I wanted to take the color off of the number 1 so you can see that. Look at the color from number 3. So the content is wrapping around the floats, but the box doesn't. So really we're seeing the third container, the third div, is actually around all this stuff. And you can tell because it's green underneath here. The green doesn't end here where this box is. It's going underneath. So when you do a float, the content will wrap around the float, but the container following does not. So it's sliding up underneath here. Just a weird thing to remember. Don't know why that is, but I think there's a reason somewhere. So I'm going to put the clear both back on, and now you'll see that now it's not underneath it, right? And we can see that this background for the third container is not wrapping up here, but it's not also going underneath here. And since I turned the transparency on, you can kind of see that. I think I'll leave that. Let's leave this background transparent. If you don't have that, go ahead and put background color transparent, which basically turns off the color that we put on with earlier. Yeah, with number 1. Yeah. Okay, so that's probably good. So, and I said you can also float in opposite directions. So that's the next thing we're going to do. So let's go down to number 3. We're on the container 3 now. And on this one, we're going to float in 2 different directions. So you don't have to go left, left, or right, right, or left, 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 right, right, right. You can do more than 2, by the way. You can do as many as you want, and they'll stack up. So I'm going to say we're on outside container 3.1. So on this one, I'm going to say float left again. And the width is going to be the same, 40%. And then I'm going to copy and paste that into the second div, but on this one I'm going to go right. So now you can see that the first container is floated over to the left, the second one is floated to the right, and we have this empty space here in the middle. But our third container then is going, hey man, there's some space in there, I can get in there, and it's sliding in there again. So how do we prevent that? Again, we go into number 3 and we say clear both. You can say, oops, I have 2 there. You can say clear left or right, but I usually just use both unless you have some special reason to just use left or right. So if you say clear left, it's going to look for a clear left margin and push it down. If you put clear right on number 3, it would look for a clear right margin. We needed both, so I put both. It might have worked with left or right, but both is simpler. So now that pushes the third one down underneath, and this is a common technique that people will use for little modules on a page, or pods they might call them. There's different names for these little containers, or a whole layout. So you've got this one floated left, that one floated right, and then you've got maybe this would be like a footer, and then you've got a gutter or an empty space between the two columns, which you often want, and that's formed because of this is 40, this is 40, that leaves 20 in the middle, and you have this negative space or empty space. So that is you can float left and right if you want to too. All right, so I think that's good on that one. Let's go to number 4. Okay, so on number 4, we want to contain the floats again. So I'm going to go, let's see, container 1, we want to float left with 40, so I'll just copy this because I'm lazy now. I'm getting lazy. So I'm going to say float left and width 40, and I want to go down to outside container 1.1 and put that in. You could type it if you want. I'll wait. Okay, I waited long enough. So now we can see that it's now 40. It's now 40% wide, and it's on the left. But look at this dotted line. This is the containing floats thing that we talked about. Let's put the same thing on container 2. So I can just copy and paste that again. Now look, I don't even see the dotted line. It's not even showing me in this browser or in this app. And look at the following div, right? Or the following heading has tried to wrap around. So what's going on now is the container called container 4 is not containing the floats. Everything is floated in this container. So that box outside container 4 doesn't really care about them anymore. Doesn't really care. So it's just going to collapse. It's collapsed. We don't even see the dotted line. You might see the dotted line on your monitor, or on your browser. And the stuff after it is starting to try to wrap around it. So how do we prevent that? Same thing we did up earlier with the image. One way to do that is to say on the outside container, which is container 4, we want to say overflow auto. And now you can see that now we see I see my dotted line. This heading is not up here sliding up around trying to sneak around the corner again, and dotted line from container 4 is now containing those two floats. So if you don't have something like this, in this case we had another element that we put a clear on that made it contain these guys, but if everything is floated inside of there, then you're gonna have to do something else. So one way to do that is overflow auto. Another way to do that is the next example. So let's go with, so we're on outside container 5. It's the same thing for the two inside containers. So I'm going to copy float left and width 40. So here's number outside container 5.1. I'm going to say float left width 40. On number 2, I'm going to do the same thing, float left width 40. So now we have the same problem that we had on the previous one. These two are floated, right? The following elements are trying to sneak around the side because everything is floated. The container, outside container 5, has collapsed pretty much. So another way to do this containing floats things besides using overflow auto, which we used here, is to say, is to float the outside container. That's another method. So you can say float left on the outside container, and we get the same thing. So we floated left on the outside container, which is called outside container 5, and now you see it's containing those two floats. The width has changed a tiny bit, and I'm not going to bother to try to figure that out. I just wanted to show you that you can say float. You can float the outside container to contain inside floats. That's the gist of that one. All right, almost done. So now we're on outside container 6. So on this one, I have outside container 6 is at the beginning here. So on this one, we're gonna float it left, and and we're going to give it a width of 80%, which we maybe already had. And then we're going to go to number 1 and put float left. And it's going to have a width of 40. We probably could have copied and pasted this again, but. And number 3, we're also going to put on. So you can see this. The thing about this one is I have a 1 and a 3. I don't have the number 2. Let me show you why I have that. I'm going to copy and paste because I'm tired of that. All right, so I have outside containers, float left. That's containing the floats. I have a width of 80%. I think I already had that, but that's okay. So I have float left and width 40, float left and width 40. But now I've put the float on the third one instead of the second one. And here's why I wanted to show you this. Even though we said float left on number 3, it doesn't go ahead of number 2. Here's number 2. It's still there. So number 1 went left as far as it could, which is the normal thing, right? And then second wrapped around just like it wanted to do. It went around and wrapped around, and then number 3 has slid up next to it and gone as far left as it can go. So if there was space, as long as there's space for this, it's going to slide up next to this one. If there wasn't, it would slide underneath. So I guess what I'm getting at is if you ever have a situation where you have something, you have some element, and you're trying to float something up to the top of the page next to it, and it's not going to the top, and you're like, what's going on? You might have to reorder the content, which means just basically reorder the actual content. So that may show, if that happens and you're like, how come this won't go to the top? Try reordering the content and it will. So if I put div 3 second in the source, it would go to the top. But we'll leave that the way it is right now. All right, so next is the last one. Woohoo, the last one is a warning about the width of floats and float drop. So outside container 7, we're going to give it a different width. So we're going to say, well, first we'll float it left so that it contains its floats again. So we'll say float left. That's why we're saying float left on that one. And then we're going to give it a width of 500 pixels. And then on outside container 7.1, we're going to give it float it left, and we're going to give it a width of 250 pixels. And then I'm going to do the same thing, I think, with number 2, except I'm going to float it right. We can float it left, actually. We'll just float it left. So let's say outside container 7.2, that's floated left. So that's what we expected, right? And so we have, there's 2 columns. Here's number 1. They're all down here at the bottom here. Here's number 1. Here's number 2. They fit exactly. 250 plus 250 is 500. But what happens, remember the box model thing? If I add anything, any padding or any border, it's not going to fit. So let me show you. If I go here, I'll go on number 2 and I'll say padding of 10 pixels. What happens? You get what's called float drop. So what happened? First one is where it was. The second one is now not 250 pixels wide. It's 270 because you have to add 10 pixels of padding on each side because there's 10 all around it. So remember when you say the width of 250, that's the width of the content only. That's not including padding unless you do the box border box trick where you can say I want it to include the padding. That's not very common. This is what you're mostly going to get. So you're going to, now we have 270. 270 plus 250 is too much. It doesn't fit, so it goes down there. Now your third, which was actually way down here, is now gone up here next to number 1. So always remember that, right? So one thing I might have to do is I might have to change the width of stuff if I want that to happen, or don't want that to happen. So let's say I go to 230, right? Should that fit? It does. So now that I've got 230, because 250 and 230 is 480, and then 20, which is 10 on each side, is 500. Now it fits. So you have to be very careful with the width of things when you're floating, or else you get this float drop thing. Even a border, right? If I go here and I say border 1 pixel. I'll do 1 pixel solid and black. So I did a 1 pixel solid black. I got float drop again. Look, the second box is now dropped below the first because this box is now, what, 252 pixels wide, because you've got 230 plus 20 plus 2, 1 on each side. That's 252. That's too much. So now I'd have to go 228. Oh, not 2,228. 228. Does it fit? Yes. Because 250 plus 228 plus 20 plus 2 is 250. So that can be kind of messy. You can probably figure that out. So if you get this situation where floats are dropping below where you want them to go, make sure everything adds up. And that goes for percentages too. It gets even more complicated with percentages because you don't know exactly how big percentages are going to be. So, and you can size things with percentages like we were doing up here. All right, so if this video or sound or something looks a little bit different, I wanted to go back and fix a couple of little errors or better ways to do things, and also to show you one more way to get this these containers with padding and border and things to fit without having to do all that math. Okay, so let's go back to the top and add a couple things here. So one thing is there's a missing underscore here. Did you guys notice that? That is right about line 21. So I'm just going to add that underscore in there. I'm also going to add one more container, so I'm going to go ahead and add another ID to this section. So I can just copy this actually. I'm going to copy that and paste and then make that outside container 8. There is a little pattern there. Did you notice that? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, you noticed that. Anyway, so we have another container, container 8, or some styles for it. We're going to add that in a second. So if I open that page in a browser, you will see that there's some weird things going on. So I open this page in a browser, and because it's not narrow and I made it wide, you get these weird things like this. So this text, this heading is trying to float up around the corner. Why is it doing that? Because on the 5th container, I think we flooded the outside container. And so if you float this container, that means that it goes as far as it can to the left. That contains the floats, but also pushes it to the left, and it makes the following elements try to go around it on the right. So we're going to fix that by going into the code for the following element, which is this heading right here. So let's go down to that. That is right in container 6, right here. So I'm going to go ahead and say add a style attribute to that, and I'm going to say equals and then quotes clear both. And what that should do, if I save that, I'm going to go ahead and save that, and oops, I left off a quote there. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and if I go refresh here, hopefully I have the right file open. Yeah, so now this now is down here where it's supposed to be. So when we say clear both, it makes this element float or go down past the floats and kind of look for a clear left and right margin. So to get out of the floats, you can do that. To prevent that from happening on the rest of them, we're going to go back up to the top. Sorry, we're jumping around a little bit here. And on container 6, instead of saying float left, we're going to comment that out, which turns it off, right? So you put star slash and slash star. And we're going to use the overflow, oops, slash star in the end here, or star slash. We're going to use the overflow property and just say overflow hidden. So hidden and auto both work. Not sure if there's a huge difference, but that will again contain the floats, but without using the float left method, and that will prevent the following items from trying to wrap around it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on both outside container 6 and outside container 7. So I just copied and pasted that. So I commented out the float left and I added overflow hidden. Same thing on outside container 7, commented out the float left and added overflow hidden. So that should make everything fit a little bit better, and we should be good to go with that. So with that being said, now we're going to add another box, and that's where I wanted to show you how I can create this effect with padding and border, but
but not have to do all that math where we had to subtract the padding and the border and all that. So I'm going to go down to the bottom, and I'm just going to copy from this heading, the last one that we used, to the end of that container. I believe it's right here. So I'm going to copy all that and then paste it. So now we've got two that say outside container 7. So we're going to change this one obviously to number 8. And in this heading, so we can know what's going on, we're going to change this because this is a different technique. We're going to say use box sizing to include padding and border in the width. What does that mean? So what this will allow us to do is include the padding and border that we had in the width. So let's go up and copy our code as well, our CSS. So we just added a short explanation there. We just added another container called outside container 8. It's exactly the same as outside container 7, except we just changed this heading so we could describe it. So we're going to use box sizing CSS. I'm going to go back up to the top, jumping around again. I'm going to copy all of outside container 7, this part here, which we did a minute ago, and go down here and paste it. All right, so now we've got two sets of outside container 7 codes. Let's change this to 8. So now it's affecting the last container. All right, so now we've got the same thing here as we've got here, except we're using container 8 instead of 7. If you look down on the page, it should look exactly the same, right? We've got here's the first one, here's the second one, here's the third one, and then we've got a new heading right there. Okay, so what's the big deal? So we saw before that if I change this width to 250, I'm gonna go ahead and change it. You can change it to 250. What happens? It breaks again, right? Because the width of this container is now 250 plus 10 on each side for the padding, so that's 270, I guess, and then 1 on each side for the border, so that's 272. So the width of this blue box now is 272. We don't want that. We want it to be 250, so it'll fit next to this one and not push this other weird thing where the third is sneaking in there and going where it's not supposed to be. So all I have to do, and this is a very popular technique to get around that, doing all that math, is I want to add one thing to this container. I'm just going to say box-sizing, and I'm going to say border box. And if we look at it, it's fixed. It looks exactly like the other one. The difference is we could use 250 here. Why is that? Because when you say border or box sizing border box, that means this width, this 250, counts the 10 pixels on each side for the padding and the border as well, count into that 250. So it kind of does the math for you. Better, right? So this is a little bit newer CSS, but it's pretty much well established now, so it's fine to use. So let's go ahead and save that, make sure that works in our browser. Here's our browser. I'm going to refresh. And yeah, it looks great. So it looks exactly like the other one, except we didn't have to do, you know, -20 for the padding, -2 for the border, etc. We just said box sizing border box. So whichever, you can put it on all your containers or none of them, depending on if you want to factor the padding and border into the width or not. That's basically what it's saying. Your other options are another option is content box, but if I do that, that's the default. So if I say content box, it's broken again. That means the 250 only counts the content. If we want it to count out to the border, we change it to border box. And it's fixed. All right, so that is it. I think that's it for this exercise on floats, and I will see you again next time.